start over now. So welcome to this week's Wednesday webinar presented by EK. This webinar is part of a series to keep members of the Alliance and our wider network engaged during this time. These sessions aim to create a space to maintain connections among and stimulate our community, which is distant and struggling with solitude due to COVID-19 control measures. EK will use this platform to continue the capacity development, sensitization of grassroots human rights defenders and organizations, particularly in the Eastern Caribbean. It will also serve to highlight issues and activities of note. Each session will provide an activist within EK's network the opportunity to share their knowledge and experience and further develop their facilitation and presentation skills. Today, we discuss the issues facing transgender people in the Eastern Caribbean and how trans-led organizations are working towards reform. What are the ways in which social justice advocates and organizations, including LGBTQ+, PLHIV, and women's organizations, can hold space for and serve as allies to the transgender community? Today's session, Transgender Advocacy in the EC, in observance of Transgender Day of Remembrance, November 20th, and Transgender Awareness Month in November, is led by Raven Gill, founder of Butterfly Barbados, host of Dear Unicorn, executive director of Equals, a woman and transgender activist who is born, raised, and currently resides in Barbados. She was propelled to be more active in human rights advocacy when her rights were infringed after an inhuman interaction with law enforcement. Barbados still has archaic legislation which is anti-LGBTQ, more specifically anti-trans, where her main focus is set currently. Her fervent passion for gender identity recognition, gender expression, and trans inclusivity in legislation has kept her visibly active in the movement for this minority community, with an already ostracized community of diverse individuals, not only in Barbados, but around the Caribbean, in solidarity with our other regional organizations. She works relentlessly to break barriers and to put in places access points for her community in healthcare, employment, and safety through education and sensitization for non-LGBTQ persons and government. Raven is, well, just a few notes. Please keep in mind that today's session is being recorded for YouTube. Mute your mic when you are not speaking. If you need to make a comment or ask a question, please use the Zoom raise hand option, and also let us be respectful in our comments. I will now turn over to Raven Gill, a member of the Alliance. Welcome, Raven, and you can start with your presentation.
Hi, thank you so much for having me on your Wednesday webinars. I'm always thrilled to be a part of anything EK. Hi, Kenita. So yes. Okay, so Butterfly Barbados, we focus on inclusivity for the trans and non-binary community where those accesses are lacking. In Barbados currently, there is no legislation that protects trans people specifically. Recently, there was an employment bill that has been passed in Parliament that covers you can't be fired on the grounds of being lesbian, gay, or bisexual. However, that has not been the case to cover trans persons. They don't understand trans identities, they don't understand the gender diverse that comes along with the LGBT community. And for me, I think it is time that we use our voice locally, regionally, as a community, as allies to help amplify the voices and the advocacy of the trans movement. The trans community in Barbados is small, but it is there. The gender non-conforming community and non-binary community is even smaller and not widely represented. So in Barbados, I think that campaigns, education, reaching out to community pages for non-LGBT persons to get a better sense of what it is to be transgender in Barbados, in the Caribbean, and the struggles that we face. So, healthcare is pretty much non-existent. There is one particular clinic that has pretty much been the forefront for trans healthcare, and that is the Barbados Family Planning Association. We've worked and sensitized their staff, doctors, nurses on how to competently work with the trans community. However, there's not the access of hormones to help persons transition safely. There's no testosterone available in Barbados that is the right testosterone for trans men to transition safely. The form of estrogen that trans women get in Barbados is birth control pills, and not the dosage that would be ideal for us to transition and have the desired outcome in terms of body development. When it comes to mental health, there is no one trained to deal with trans mental health. The components of identifying a trans person, helping them navigate the transition, what they want, what they don't want, or helping them get to a place where they can decide if this is where I want to stay mentally and just present as I am, or do they want to match their inside to the outside with surgeries or other modifications, whatever the case may be. And education, there has been one noted trans woman that went to university. However, there have been several other trans persons that have been to university before, but they could not navigate this space because of non-inclusive policies that the university has. So we need to educate the policymakers in education. We need to educate the schools. There was an incident with a transgender child, and the child was not allowed to come to school presenting as the gender that they identify as. And it was a big um, controversy, really, in the media, where persons were picking at the child, lashing out at the school. The Minister of Education made some very ridiculous points about being transgender does not affect the way that the child learns, and therefore there's no need to address the situation by creating laws or creating anything to amend the situation in terms of having the child be able to go to school how they identify it. Noted it was a private school. However, the education um the education curriculum cannot really vary because it is the education curriculum for the country. When it comes to legislation, like I said, there is nothing that helps the trans community have access to domestic violence rights. If you're a trans person and you're attacked, you go to the police station. This is just something that I've experienced myself. They will tell you, well, you chose this life, you deserve it. Get out the station. And for those persons that may challenge me, I also know the names and the badge numbers of all those police officers I had the encounter with. So if they think that I'm telling lies, I have the proof. Anyway, so we've done sensitization trainings in the past with the police, but the police have said the ones that have been there, they were sent. They didn't come. All of them did not come willingly, and they believe that middle management, upper management, who dictates the policies of how the police station is run, should have been there. And I said, I agree, some persons from higher up should have been there. However, you that engage with the persons coming through the door at the desk still need to be educated, sensitized, and trained on how to competently work with the community. The laws do not have anything to state or recognize trans or gender identity. There's no way that we can change the gender identity, the gender marker, sorry, on our birth certificate, on our documents, and that is through a colonial law, a colonial piece of legislation that's been left there that has never been challenged by any trans person or gender non-conforming or even intersex persons have never challenged it in Barbados. Then, then that's the way the statistics form. So that impedes us from changing our gender marker. And in conversations with the registrar of the Supreme Court, it's been noted that the only way to change it is through going to court and challenging it. Now, persons that have been privy to court matters know that it takes time, and even if you've not been experienced in dealing with the court, it does take a long time to have these matters heard, to have these things consulted on, to have these things amended, to have any slight change takes a really long time. And I can see why persons that are trans and non-binary have left the country to become asylum seekers in other countries where they can have the access to the things that we don't have access to here. Healthcare, education, gender marker change, competent surgeries that help us align with the gender that we identify with so that we can present how we feel and cut down on the dysphoria that we experience as trans persons. So along with all of these things, there is also something that some persons like to deny or don't like to actively talk about, and that is inter-community fighting. The L, the G, and the B don't always necessarily get along with the T. Some persons have also said they think that the T should be separate from the LGBT movement. I don't agree. Why would we leave a community that can shoulder some of the burdens that we face and give us support when we need it? Does it make sense to leave the fight of an already ostracized minority community to go and stand alone where it will be 10 times worse? So for those persons that feel that the trans community should separate from the LGBT fight, I wholeheartedly disagree, and I think it does not make a lot of sense. Along with the fight in the community, there is also fighting within the activism realm. I've also experienced where some feminists do not agree that trans women should be a part of the feminist movement. And though having lengthy conversations and heart to hearts and trying to explain and give a genuine insight to the life and the struggles of trans women, they still don't agree that we should be a part of the movement. Some trans women globally have children biological or adopted. In Barbados, LGBT persons, specifically in this context, trans, cannot adopt. There are things in place that forbid us from adopting. And the anecdotal beliefs that we are pedophiles is normally pushed so that it stops us from having family. Also the traditional way, which is by procreation. So these things also hurt the community by trying to navigate having a family of their own. When it comes to, for instance, there are women that experience trouble giving birth or having a child, sorry. These persons go to fertility clinics for IVF, and the same way that they experience the trauma of not being able to have their own children biologically, it is the same fight for trans women. After being on hormones for years, and sometimes you go through the process to become yourself, to unlock the real you, to share it with the world, friends, family, whoever, there is not always a lot of education, especially in the Caribbean, where you know that if you want to have biological children, you should go and see the fertility clinic, see if you can harvest your sperm and store it for later use. If you are a trans man, harvest your eggs and save them for later use so you can have a biological child to carry on your bloodline, however that may be. A lot of the times we've transitioned without knowing those implications. I want to be who I want to be, and I just go taking hormones, taking the testosterone blockers, and not realizing that it could potentially damage my chances of having biological children of my own. And the the reason that you start the process of transitioning is to stop experiencing the amount of dysphoria you have when you look in the mirror, when you walk past a car and you see your reflection. It's not what how you identify or see yourself in your mind's eye. You go through the process of transitioning so that you can match how you feel on the inside. And oftentimes the for lack of better words, the rush to transition creates the negative result of not having access to children for those who want children. So you go through the process of transitioning for self to feel better, to have um, more peace of mind, stability in certain areas, but then later on in life you want to have a child. This has been slighted or diminished due to your medical transition. And coming off of hormones for a 6 month to a 12-month period to see if there's anything that can be done, anything that can be harvested, any remnants of your sexual reproductive organs, the dysphoria comes back. So it is a double-edged sword, and people often don't talk about those things. And again, when it comes to the feminist movement, particularly, you explain all of that. Some women, you have the same struggles. You can't have children if it's trans woman because she's been on hormones for so long that her sperm is damaged. If she does have her biological genitalia, versus the woman that has been born with all of her anatomic parts and you still can't have a child. There should be some unison to understand the struggles of not being able to become a mother. However, there's some of those persons who willfully go and spread the hatred and the disgust that, well, you still aren't a real woman, you can't have children, even though they're themselves are real women and can't have children. So I found it particularly challenging sometimes navigating the feminist movement. I obviously have friends that are feminists and pro-trans and all of these things. However, you still but those who have larger voices that still fight to exclude the trans community. And often we talk about intersectionality and it is preached that intersectionality is the way forward. However, there's still things that we don't want to approach to be cordial, far less intersectional. And these things do the trans community a disservice because what's the point? And I've heard this again from friends and other trans persons. What's the point of fighting for something where you know it's not going to happen? And that's the mentality because they've been knocked down so many times. Or there are persons who were doing the work, doing being on the front line, being visible, and that person, for whatever reason unknown to the rest of the community, has stopped or migrated, or for some in some cases detransition because the life of heteronormativity seems easier to navigate. But again, heterosexual persons, cisgender persons have their own struggles. So the key forward for me personally is an open and honest conversation, understanding, and having the capacity to be more empathetic genuinely, not performative allyship, not okay, well, we're doing it to your cause. It's not only our cause, it is our cause. So some of the wording, the language, the disingenuous mindset towards the trans community has impacted us, and I think it has slowed down the process where we've seen um the L, the G, and the B have more access, more things done. And it is not that the trans community has not been doing the work, has not been fighting as hard as the others. It is the support that is lacking, the lack of support from allies, sometimes from the other LGB community members, the lack of support and understanding from healthcare providers, from government. So these things often impact the way that the work is done, the way the work is pushed. And I think it is paramount that we as individuals, even if your work is climate change, reach out to other trans activists, other organizations, trans or non-binary, to see if you can get together and increase the chances of getting to your goal with the trans community included, or if it is abortion rights, have trans people along on the movement, on the journey. If it is whatever you are seeking to do, be inclusive of the trans community. So yeah. Questions, queries, comments?
Raven, thank you so very much for this presentation. I mean, it's one that has been um, long awaiting. I think when we look at trans experience in the Eastern Caribbean, it's not one that is as visible as other places. Um, and although I have to admit, one of the first trans visible persons I met was actually out of Barbados, Didi. Um, we have seen the rest of the islands, especially in the Eastern Caribbean, not necessarily as visible as that of those in Barbados. And for me, I want to kind of probably kind of map this to the Eastern Caribbean, because we know there's things happening in Trinidad, Jamaica, Guyana, and so on and so forth, where that is more progressive, but that's also the bigger islands, each of them basically with a trans organization. But when we look at Barbados and the rest of the Eastern Caribbean, there is so much happening in Barbados, but you can hardly find real visible persons on the islands, say like St. Kitts, say like Dominica, even to some extent St. Lucia, that are really visible as you persons in Barbados and the other Caribbean countries. What can an organization like ECADE do more to support you, to support communities where people actually feel safe enough to identify, but also to be visible?
So I agree that like Didi was the role model for me. Like going to school as a boy, I would pass and stare at her in awe because I could see myself and she has a job, like a normal job. And I think that again, amplifying trans voices is a big thing. There is a lack of visible representation in other Caribbean countries for many reasons, for safety, lack of education. There are some trans persons that do not know that they are trans, but again, you can't police people's genders or gender identities and say, well, hey, I know that you're trans, do this. But I think education is the best way to get ahead of this. Campaigns, even if it is just social media and boosting the post so it reaches everybody, or even like doing a video or a voiceover and reaching out to radio stations. We've worked with the media houses here, so they are aware of the community, and just have a 30-second ad stating, do you know what transgender is? Being transgender is when you don't identify with the sex that you were assigned at birth. An hour later you do you know that all trans persons don't present the way that you think they should? All trans persons don't sound the same, blah, blah, blah. The same way that other persons are diverse, women look different, sound different, different heights, blah, blah, blah. Same kind of thing. And I'm going to be very honest, EK has been so kind to Butterfly and Equals in terms of providing support, even when we didn't know that we needed that support, even when we didn't think that, even when we thought that, oh, this may be a redundant training or a redundant something that we've done with people at USAID or whoever that's been here funding before. Those US, UK, other organizations that are not Caribbean born, bred, focused don't know the struggles that we face as a Caribbean people. So EKID has definitely been, for me, a big stepping stone towards fine-tuning the approach for Caribbean activism, LGBT human rights activism. And again, before it was just, okay, so trans organization, we're only focusing on trans people, then on non-binary people or gender non-conforming persons. But then where does that leave us? Without funding, so you need to pivot to have a more inclusive reach. Do climate change or work with them for abortion rights or other things. So EK has provided a wider scope to certain organizations like mine, for Equals, and it has been a journey. And I think that reaching out to other local LGBT organizations in other Caribbean countries and asking, hey, do you know if there are any trans persons or gender non-conforming persons, non-binary individuals that want a voice or would like help amplifying their voice? That I think that's the way to go about it. And even if they don't necessarily want to be visible, let's show them how they can make small steps to becoming somewhat more noticeable, even if not optically visible.
So just before they say I take over everything, I have one last question for you, Raven. I know EK recently challenged you and Butterfly to actually start thinking about the trans conversation, trans non-binary conversation for the Eastern Caribbean. Whether that is in a webinar, whether that is in a follow-up webinar with more trans-focused persons, or whether that's a conference in person, is there anything you can tell us in terms of what can we look forward to, or what are some of the agenda items you think that would be paramount in making sure it's part of such a conversation, especially the first of its kind in this region particularly?
Wow, yes, we've been challenged by EKID, and yeah. So something that we've been working on, I think, is having a local dialogue where we tackle all the things that we don't have access to. And I know it sounds redundant, but for instance, the country does their census to gather information of impoverished communities, um, teen pregnancies, those kind of things, getting statistics on the persons, the citizens that they serve. These censuses never include trans persons, trans identities. So creating campaigns, awareness, even just email blasts constantly to legislators, hey, what about us? Um, or using the buy-in that we have, let's say with the Minister of Labor, to invite other parliamentarians to be trans sensitized specifically. If it is working on a program that has 3 or 4 trans youth that are interested in politics, to have them boost the work that we've been doing. Once they have their into parliament, see the role of um debates and whatever, and have them molded so that in the future we can see our representation in parliament, we can see our representation in the senate, we can senate, yeah, um so that then there is change that needs to be happened. They can't say they've not seen us, they don't know where to reach us. The person's already in there, and it's just to find more ways to become visible and break every feeling possible. So yeah.
Definitely look forward to this. And as you know, you definitely have the support of EQ. Sorry, Randall, it sounds like I just took over your session. Um, but I'm just so happy that this conversation is happening because I think many a times trans and non-binary persons are not necessarily given sufficient space and visibility nor respect that is due, especially within the LGBT realm of things. And for a very long time, I think one of the things that you saw happen is the really the empowerment and the pushing of gay men, and that was because of HIV. And that HIV epidemic just changed the lives of everyone because it seems like that is the only context. And even then, when HIV decided, okay, we're going to transform, they transform in terms of saying MSMs and trans people, which kind of group them in the same because they were only looking at a particular activity and risk factor and still not the individual. Now, what that did was lesbian, bisexual people, non-binary people, a lot of them end up being in the gray areas um, of non-conversation. And so now there's a push like, um, you know, where exactly are we? Where is funding headed? And especially for the Caribbean region, I don't think it's just like trans not being funded. The entire LGBT alphabet is not being funded at the rate that we'd like it to be. Um, but I have to admit, Raven, um, because a lot of trans people also indulged in HIV, there was also not a lot of hype or awareness around trans issues as an individual issue. They tried to migrate it into other issues before, but we can see in the last 5 years, in the last 10 years, um, going to 10 years, where trans issues have now just been isolated. A trans issue is a trans issue. Let's not try to group it with nothing because we want it to be identified as. And I think that's the difference between the advocacy trans people have done before and what they are doing now. And I think now is the time to really push that envelope. So again, saying all of this to say thank you.
Yeah, I do agree because I've been on projects before that were HIV focused and funded, and they had lumped MSMs, gay men, with TG women. and they were looking at the anal penetration part only, or worse yet, they were dumbing us down to our biological birth genitals. So that was very frustrating because then trans men were at a disadvantage. You didn't care about trans men. And when I spoke about this, it was chastised, and I still didn't care because I'm trans. So I have to look out for my brothers, the trans men, or my cousins, the non-binary persons. That family is still so close, but still so widely separated by these people coming with their money and saying we want you to do this and dangle it in front of you. And if you don't do what we want, we pull it and say, well, the trans community is invisible, or they don't want the work, they don't do a lot of things they would say. But I do agree that for the past couple of years, we've seen a shift where trans women have said we're not only a HIV statistic, we don't want projects or funding to do with HIV. There in Barbados, we have a comprehensive HIV unit that welcomes trans, gay, straight, lesbian, bisexual, pansexual, whoever. They provide a well-rounded service for the community. So there's nothing that specifically say, well, we know that trans persons in particular cannot access ARTs or condoms or lubricants, HIV, STI screening. That's been done. That's been covered. Kudos to the gay men and trans men who've worked on those projects prior to me. But that's not the focus for the trans community now. We need mental health care providers to identify that we may be struggling from depression, or being bipolar is not the best thing untreated while transitioning. We need healthcare providers to do prostate exams for trans women still, and give us a breast exam, a mammogram, whatever the case may be, then presenting to them with the things that they need, the services, the tests done for. So the work has progressed. It's going to continue to progress. I'm going to go old and gray working, doing this, because for me, there will always be something in the community to strive for, to fight for, to advocate for. It's going to take time. And this has definitely taught my impatient ass to be patient. So a lot more to go.
Uh, yes. Thank you very much, Raven. I'm not sure, but it's very dark because I guess now it's raining. So, um, but I think you mentioned something that's really good about the mental health issues that lots of people within the community face, and I think the trans community is. I think I think we should be paying a lot more attention to the trans community. As most times they're excluded from almost all the conversations that we're having. So it's good to have you on here today, speak on these issues and raising the awareness that we all need to help better understand the needs and wants of the trans community. And I see we have hands up by Felicia. I think I'm not sure if I pronounced the name right. But you could go ahead now and ask your question.
Hi, good day.
Hello.
Hello. Hi, you
Yeah,
can hear me?
yeah.
Okay. What question I have to ask? I am the president for our women's organization, and we have persons a part of our organization who are um women who identify themselves as men also, um men who identify themselves as women. But what I want to know is how can we assist trans in the Caribbean and local organization and people? How can we help them? Yes.
Thanks for the question. So a basic understanding of what being transgender is, and understanding obviously that individuals vary. So again, not painting every transgender person with the same brush, thinking that all trans women are supposed to have breasts, long hair, nails, and makeup and lashes. Not every trans woman is supposed to sound like she sings opera. Those stereotypes we need to be broken so that you can come to the trans individuals on a human level where you can understand the struggles or at least help them navigate the struggles that they're going through. As well as doing research, there are papers published that help guide the medical transition, and you can see if those resources are available in country in terms of medication. You can also see um, other regional organizations that have done work with like mental health care providers, because Butterfly had done a mental health workshop with psychiatrists, psychologists, other mental health professionals in Barbados. And since that sensitization training, the head of the university has reached out to me from the psychiatry clerkship to speak to the fourth and fifth year students about the issues specifically the trans community faces. So again, and that's an ongoing partnership because they've already asked me to speak again in 2021. So if there is a case where you don't have competent mental health care providers, reach out to other organizations, reach out to ECAID and see if they can put you on to somebody like Butterfly, or reach out to Butterfly specifically, or even if you do a Google search, like certain websites will come up, and just send an email and see how they can help you best help the community that you also serve. Um, there's also online tools that help you navigate or gauge where the person is mentally, and along with finding a doctor, it doesn't need to be a whole group of them. Find one that's interested in the community and help them get to a point of help them get to a point of adaptability where they can help the community, even if it is not necessarily what the community wants right now. It may be a stepping stone so that they grow the patience to develop in the period that they're supposed to, as opposed to rushing it. Because sometimes you find persons wanting to have surgeries and there are no surgeons in Barbados specifically, or the Caribbean, as far as I know about, unless you're talking about Dominican Republic, or yeah, that can perform surgeries to help trans bodies present as the bodies that they want. So yeah, I think before I start rambling, yes.
Yeah. So our my main concern here with persons is that we are still fighting the battle to be accepted
Sorry?
in my country. We are still fighting the trans the LGBTQ community is still fighting to be accepted in my country.
Mm-hmm.
So for me to find somebody to um sensitize the community, it is hard. Like I will have to get somebody from EKID or from Colors who has the knowledge, cause and would know how to deal with this community, know how to educate them about what they're going through, because it's lacking here. Yeah, so I
Right.
think we would really need that here, and I don't really have the knowledge. I would really like to learn more how to deal with this community.
So
Mhm.
education, like you said, is a big thing. And if you do reach out to EKID or Colors for help, let them provide online trainings, let them provide focus group, reach out to the community and see if they're interested in focus groups to better help assess the needs that they have. Because sometimes if you're not a community member, you don't always understand the needs. So it may be a bit more well received if, even if it's another Caribbean trans person, reaching out, asking them, hey, what do you guys need? How can we provide support for you? So that's the kind of things that you should look to do along with the education.
Right, that's true. Because I'm in education, right? So what I'm doing now with a few of the trans young men that we have here, I am trying to get them to go to school because I see educating themselves is very important, and so that's just one way that I'm trying to assist them to go to school. But they need house because persons would be thrown out of their homes, and so.
Right. Okay. So the education point is definitely a good one, but have they expressed a desire to continue learning, and what policies are in place to protect them so that they're not attacked or overly chastised or harassed go to school to access the, and in terms of housing, isn't there like welfare? Can't you see if you can find someone who is um understanding of the community struggles? I know you said there are challenges with understanding the community, but do you think there is a possibility you can reach out to someone in welfare or national housing and see if that is something that they will be able to help with?
Yeah, I have been trying. I've spoken to a gentleman, Mr. Tanis. He was saying he's trying to get a home, a house of hope. So we were going to collaborate to help. Really, it is difficult. I don't see the government really helping because we don't even have a shelter for battered women here. Much less to that community. So it's 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 difficult.
Okay, so like I said about intersectionality, maybe if you could find a way to overlap the two, if you go and champion for a shelter for abused and battered women or victims of gender-based violence or assaults, and have it broadly so that you can have the trans men or LGBT persons share the shelter. So one level is for the women, the other is for the LGBT, the other is for children. If that is a way that you can go about approaching that situation, or again reach out to EKID and see if they can provide a link to someone that you may be able to get funding for to at least buy a house or do emergency housing where you find a landlord that is okay with the community, and come to a reasonable amount of money that you can pay through the grant, or and then still do fundraising so that when the grant is over you have some backup to help these people stay safe.
Right. Thank you. That's a brilliant idea. I would.
Okay, thank you, Felicia, and for that question, and thank you, Raven. Do anyone else have any other questions for Raven before we wrap up? Because we're actually getting near the hour mark that we set for this session. So if anybody else has any question, now is the time to do so. Okay, and there's one from, I think, Delilah, is that correct?
Yeah, hi. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Dalila Ikal. Actually, I am from Belize. And I had teamed up with a close friend of mine, and he is a transgender male. And We have decided to work very closely with doing journalism activism, something I believe is missing in the NGO work. And one of our first focuses is highlighting transgender persons, the challenges and really their situation in Belize. Um, I'd like to ask though, I've attended some conversations and I see that maybe I may be wrong, but I'm trying to understand this. To me, it appears that transgender men are still a lot less visible than transgender women. Is my observation right? And if so, why would that be? There is an organization in Belize that focuses primarily on transgender women. Um, but I'm not sure, I haven't seen much work done for transgender men. Is there a difference in working with these different, with the populations, transgender men and women? Are they like considered separate, or what really is the challenge there?
So thanks for the question. The challenge mainly, again, is visibility and understanding. So cultural attitudes play a part in how people will determine how they want to present in public. Trans women, from the beginning of time, from my understanding, have always had the need to be visible and have their place recognized in the public, in jobs, just in general being more visible. There's no difference between trans men and women other than it's a man, it's a woman. But trans men, again, the visibility lacks because you may see somebody and you may think that this person is a lesbian, but they're actually trans. The reason that they may still appear feminine to you, that you may be able to tell that they are still a woman in your mind, is because they may have some attributes, bigger breasts, or they may have a more rounded face, more quote unquote feminine features that you may still be able to tell this person to you is a woman. They may be in fact a trans man, but again, you have to get away from the idea that trans men are supposed to look like binary men, beards, uncapped sometimes, muscular, whatever the case may be, are extremely thin. When it comes to representation for the trans movement, it is definitely more trans women led. The visibility for trans women is definitely more, from my experience, than visibility for trans men. However, I think that, again, education needs to be done within the communities. Again, you can't police people's genders. Even if you can tell that they're trans, they may not yet know or identify as trans. And there has been an instance here where a trans man, I hate talking about this. There's been an instance where a trans man had been raped in Barbados, and the media posted the article in the paper saying, "Gentleman gets a taste of his own male medicine," and they were pretty much laughing at the fact that this trans man, gender non-conforming person, was raped by 3 men. And then the backlash came from persons, activists, whoever, talking about why would you post something so grotesque. But again, laughing or not having any empathy for the LGBT trans specific communities is still a big thing. You've seen the Disclosure movie where on Netflix where they've made trans women jokes about of how they look, how they sound, how the reaction when a man finds out a woman is trans, that he innately wants to kill her or run. It's the same thing for trans men. It's a mockery of your gender identity, your gender expression. devalidating your existence. So you can't fault trans men for not being visible if it is safer for them to navigate as a lesbian or presenting as a butch lesbian. I think that there needs to be more education and more push for trans men to be visible to help amplify the movement where it is not just trans women, it's not only trans women. The men are there to complement the trans movement.
Thank you. Finally, just one last quick question. Do you believe that the media, through relevant documentaries within the Caribbean or for further education, actually have an impact with the direction of the work that is being done here in the Caribbean?
I find sometimes, depending on the reaction that the documentary hopes to incite, is what changes the way that the movement has impacted the world. Sometimes I've seen other documentaries that I've started to watch documentaries or videos, and 2 minutes in, I'm like, I'm not going to watch the rest of this. I can see this is going to be garbage. The narrative is biased, or it is looking to get a specific reaction from persons. I think if you really want an accurate view of how the movement is going trans specific, look at community pages, look at documents, research papers, books that the trans community has published, talking about their experience, their journey, their triumphs, their fails. Look at things that trans people actively have more than 10% say in what goes into the final product. We Butterfly was doing a documentary on trans persons in Barbados. However, due to COVID, that had come to a stop. I'm still going to push to get it put out between now and the middle of next year. Granted that COVID allows, but I do think that country specific, the context is different for every country. Like you said, Belize, there's no, the organization, you're not seeing the work, you're not seeing trans men visible. I know 3 trans men here, the 3 of them are interested in becoming visible in the movement. However, 2 of them have to worry about family and jobs. So looking at the circumstances of each country, each organization's goals will determine the best outlook on how you can map maybe the movement or the impact that it has or will have.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Raven, just hi, my name is Star from
Hi,
Belize.
Star.
Hi. So based on the conversation and the questions that Dalila had asked, I also had a meeting this morning with a couple trans guys, and some of them were concerned, saying that when it comes to the data for trans people on a whole, there's little to none, and if there is, it's like trans women specific related to HIV only. There is not much in terms of homelessness or anything. It's just trans women living with HIV. And the other interesting fact was that in the UK, it's, I don't mean to be rude, but there seems to be like this high level of ignorance, but mainly because they believe everything is USA specific. Like if there's anything to talk about, it's USA. Nothing. They never heard of Trinidad. They've never heard of any other country, they don't believe that there's LGBT people living in any other part of the world but USA and UK. And and so like documentaries such as yours, and I Am One in Trinidad released a documentary regarding the King Show that was held last year, which I was a part of. That was unique in the eyes of many of the film directors in the UK, because like I said, there's no information, there's no data, and I think the documentaries that we're all working on will definitely have an impact in telling the untold stories of our country specific topics and the community in our countries.
Yeah, thanks, Star. I do agree. I just also came out of a meeting with a panel, sorry, with UK and US activists. And in some of the comments in chats, there were still people that said they've never heard of Barbados, and I find that so mind-boggling. However, you are right. The data on trans representation, trans visibility, trans persons in the Caribbean is almost non-existent. And from my experience, I know that research has to be done by accredited bodies like university or private funded research projects. But the problem with that is, again, from experience working on an HIV focused program, the funding comes for Latin America and the Caribbean. They don't really mean the Caribbean. They really mean the Dominican Republic. So that population is obviously what huger in terms of numbers of trans women and trans men. And those statistics go towards the 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 global north. The Caribbean is a different subset of individuals, different ethnic backgrounds, a whole lot of cultural differences. There's no research that I can find concrete that have been done Caribbean specific for trans persons. Even in conversations with donors looking to come to the Caribbean, I've said to them, the problem that lies with the research, trans women and men rarely have a PhD. And I'm being modest. So they want PhDs, masters, bachelors, those kind of things that the trans community does not have access to for various reasons. And when they do research, it is done from a cisgender heteronormative view that does not accurately represent the community. It doesn't have community buy-in there, as there's no star sitting down with the person doing the analysis, giving context to the findings. There's no me saying, well, I'm going to take you here to get the research, the cumulative data. There is little to no trans buy-in, and that is the problem. When you don't have the community there to guide or navigate, and there's no, I do not believe that crap about there is no trans person in the Caribbean that has a higher education. Even if you don't have the master's, the PhD, the bachelor's, you have community activists on the ground that are a part of the movement doing the work. It's just a matter of reaching out. And the problem that some of these funders, donors, researchers have is that they know what their consultant fee, their contract is. They know the price that they've given to these people to do the work for them. They don't want to offer the trans community that. So I don't have a problem with trans activists saying, no, I'm not doing the work because you're not paying us 30% of what the consultants are getting. So that also contributes to why there is no accurate data, no accurate representation, no even there isn't really even any anecdotal findings on trans community, trans experience, because it always comes from oh well, we ain't really sure, still don't understand. So that those are the problems that I have found and experienced when it comes to research. Um, Again, when you talk about trans or LGBT things in the Caribbean, it's always said from the non-LGBT persons that it is imported, it's being pushed down our throats and we're just sucking it up because we are sponges and we don't have a brain to process these things. We're not living this life. It's just smoke and mirrors. That does not make sense. So then you see that when you talk about countries like Barbados, Belize, St. Lucia, and you're seeing that there is a presence of trans activists, there is work being done. You can see the work online. You can see the work being amplified by other, not even only, and this is why I need to give another round of applause to EKID. EKID is a regional organization, a regional network hub. EKID promotes and does what things like Outright or USA and PEPFAR do. They're doing it for their community, the Caribbean people. So having access to EKID boosting the work as opposed to having foreign imports like the US or the UK or the EU and saying, oh well, we handpicked this little place like Haiti to say, hey, we know that there's this group here doing whatever. No, we have our own regional um bodies like the US and whoever doing the work, promoting the work. So I think it's just a matter of finding, and we as trans activists need to tell funders when they come to the Caribbean, you want this done, that's not gonna help us when you leave. This is what we need done, and this is what's gonna magnify the work that we've been doing. So yeah.
Also, I have a quick question, one more question. And this
Mm-hmm.
could be like to whoever would like to answer it as well. So, how do how can the LGBT movement or people tap into the how can I say, tap into getting more or being heard by politicians or people in power that make that have the that can make the decisions or um, you know, can help promote more rights and protection for the community members.
Okay, so for me, that's the easy question. You need to know what the community wants. When you know what the community wants, what the community needs, you go to your representative for your area, for whoever. Let's say for education, you know, the community wants access to secondary school, to um postgraduate studies. Go there with the evidence, go there with the knowledge, go knowing how you want to tell them very bluntly. Do not pretty it up. How you want this, what the community wants. When you engage via emails, via letters, via phone calls, have a paper trail, so that when they say you've not reached out, you can say, yes, we have it here. Or even if you go and email 1 month and there's no reply, 2 weeks later, after that month period, you send another email. 2 weeks later, and there is no correspondence, you know they're actively ignoring you. That's when you go and make noise. Go to the media. The media loves a salacious story. This may be bad information. This may be a bad thing to say, but the media likes something salacious to get to the conversation going. Go to the media and say, well, the government does not want to recognize its citizens. They want to take the money from the Chinese or from Panama, but they don't actively help all of its citizens that they promise when they take these people's money. Find a way to get in. Letters, calls, standing in front of the Supreme Court with signs, not making a sound. Somebody's going to use their camera phone and take a picture, record a video. Somebody from the media is going to reach out to you if you have your organization name on the flag or the placard or whatever, and you're going to get the traction then and only then by being consistent to get the change that you need. Then legislators or policymakers or other stakeholders are going to have to respond. Even if it is to try to silence you, that is when you take it and spin it to your advantage.
Just to add, Star, in terms of thinking through, also, one of the things you should never have is an expectation that any government official will see it in your best interest to change laws.
Agreed.
It's one that consistency has to come in the advocacy that you do, the conversations that you're having. So you try to have meetings, whether it's to call, to write emails, and you document those things. You also reach out to diplomatic corps in country, whether it be the US Embassy, EU, whoever, and you also look to see where they can also invite you to those receptions or to those meetings that allow you to have access. You also engage in stuff around the OAS, the UN. That would also allow you an opportunity to also engage your government. All this is different individuals, right? But all of this, your elevator speech should always be on point. And what your elevator speech is, like Raven said, it's understanding what the community needs, knowing what you are asking for, or knowing what you are requesting of them or support from them, whichever way it goes. You need to know what the ask is for each individual, because that's going to look a little different. Whether it's to an ambassador, whether it's to a minister, even permanent secretary in the ministries, these are also points of contact. But at the end of the day, the other thing that you also need to be doing is documenting the stories from your own community, that when you're speaking, you're not just speaking about I experience, you speak about the experience of the number of people, whether it is reporting to the police, whether it is going to the health center or the hospital, or even issues of family and what those reactions are and non-protections. And so it gives that one in addition to what, so we always say there is the more passive side of advocacy, which is the diplomatic trying to do the connections. And then there's the more radical side, which is what Raven is talking about, which is more like hit them with everything and let them come for you.
Thank you so much for explaining that, and definitely we'll keep that in mind, and we're taking notes as we go along.
Just remember there is no wrong method. Sometimes you do both, sometimes you do one, and it does not mean that you alone have to do it. Somebody else might do one whilst you do another. At the end of the day, the end game is important, but conversation is also very good.
Thank you.
And with that, I say thank you, everyone. I think, the conversation around the trans community is one I think that needs to be continued, because we really and truly have a lot more to discuss and dissect around that specific group of people within the community. So I guess we have two comments here, one from Maria and one from Auden. Yeah, so whichever wants to go first can go.
Here is my non-binary assistant who finally showed up very late. Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Oh my God, I'm sweating bullets.
Good to see you.
How are you?
I'm great, thank you. I'm not sweating bullets, but I'm good.
Oh. Hello to everyone then.
Got that.
No, but I wanted to just add a few things. I think some of what I wanted to say was adequately dealt with. I agree with Raven when she just kind of detailed some of the ways that we can engage with the political process, engage with our representatives. And of course, it's important to realize that even when you engage with them, you send the letters, etc. Even when you do that, you meet them in different spaces and you engage with them, whether it be at a cocktail party or at the market, you know, or on the street, etc. You try to engage in some of the amazing thing for me is that so many activists are part of political parties and have direct access to their political representatives, but then they don't want to involve their advocacy with their political life. I can't understand that kind of separation, but some people prefer it that way. But if you can use the access that you have politically to mention your advocacy and to work around that, I think you use every tool in the toolbox, right? But not everybody does that. And even when you send those letters and you don't get a response, that is also important. That's also a response, because when you document it, this is something that you would come back and say, hey, I've written to you, I've spoken to you 20 times about this. I've spoken to this person 20 times. So you all know, like, for example, a popular comment is that, oh, we don't have these people in our country. We don't know anything about this organization. Yeah, you say, but we've sent letters, we've spoken to this ministry, that ministry, etc. So having that information is also important, even though they don't respond to you, knowing that you sent it, knowing that you sought to start a conversation, that is stuff that you could use in your advocacy. And the media aspect, that could also be that could also backfire. So you also have to be very careful. One thing I think, one tip is to be ready to say what you have to say and say nothing else. Because the media, yes, they do like salacious stories, and you will want to bring one issue to their attention, and then they want to ask you about the murder of a trans person in Mexico, or they want to ask you about marriage in the US and some changes in the law in the US. No, just they're very, very, very good at being very persistent as well. So when you want to use the media, you also have to be ready to know that they will try to make you say a lot of stuff that may end up making you and your advocacy look bad. So it's not as easy as just go to the media. Preparing a media statement is great having, but always just a simple tip: say nothing more than what you came to say, and try not to go beyond that.
I did say that my advice may be a bit off, but again, I've had media training, so one thing I know is to never say no comment. If you have a script, stick to the script, like Maria said. Say you're going to talk about the inaccess to healthcare and only talk about healthcare, nothing else. Don't stray away from it, because then you will find yourself not in the paper for what you're going to get done. So yes, be very aware of the media manipulating you.
Yeah. And I also want to mention the social media. I think that was mentioned, and we need to, yes, ICID is a network, but the network is as strong as its weakest link, right? We have to remember that too. So, which is why we have several platforms. We have the Facebook group, we have the email, we have the WhatsApp group, etc., in which we try to share, because we want us to be able to amplify each other's voices. This is a place for you to share. It's not just for ICID to put when ICID has an activity. These are spaces where you can put when you have an activity. We do try to be very active on social media in sharing the work that is being done by our partners. So we do try to do that, and we try to also tag other members so that they are aware of what what the other organizations are doing. So we want that to be something that is just par for the course for every organization. So when Butterfly logs onto its social media, it's not just to share what Butterfly is doing, but also to ensure that it follows and it comments, shares, likes the work that other organizations are doing. So yeah, Restore is not a trans organization, but definitely is an organization that works at the intersection. So you look out for what they're doing, and you try to amplify their work and make sure that your organization is visible through their pages on their platforms as well, by you commenting. That it works, it works two ways. And I think that's something that we have to be aware of when you go, not just about sharing your stuff, but trying to amplify the voices of the other organizations, the other activists, and making that something that you just do as part of your advocacy. And even when you speak to the politicians as well, sometimes you may not be able to speak to your issue, but you can certainly speak to issues that maybe a women's organization or HIV organization is facing, that particular minister can address or has the wherewithal to do something about. So you may not always approach somebody on the basis of your work. It's not always about your organization and your work. Sometimes you speak up for others. And I think all of us could take that example. And that in itself is not just, it redounds to your benefit. Maybe in the long term, it's a long haul. It's not about getting results right now for you all the time. Sometimes when you see an opportunity, it's not an opportunity for you, but you can speak for others as well. And finally, on the thing you mentioned about research, I am, let me tell you, I am always in that hole with the research question and pulling from research from other people. But I think what we have to ultimately decide is also not be hampered by lack of research, but just do the work. Lived experience is the most powerful thing. And that is why it's so good to have people who are part of the community in the advocacy, because nothing, you cannot stand here and tell me there's no trans person in Barbados when I am looking at you and I'm a trans person in Barbados, right? So forget if you're going to tell me they're 20, and then the question is, are you going to sacrifice my life for the quote unquote greater good? And I think lived experience is the most powerful thing. If we can make our own videos, speak out on our own, and I think that's happening more and more. People are being more comfortable with coming out and not being in the shadows. And we need more activists, we need more time, we need more resources. But whatever little that we can do, I think we should not let lack of research be a stumbling block for us. Yeah, and that's about it. And just wanted to thank you, Raven, for the session. It was very refreshing to hear what's happening with you and Butterfly in Barbados. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you so much for having me. Must do this again soon.
Yes.
Okay,
And
and
I'll try to have,
okay.
I'll try to have more persons from the organization come and give their own little experience and the work that we've been doing, just so that I'm not only the visible representation of Butterfly.
Well, I'd love to see a clash of Raven, Didi, and Daedrina. That's what I'm looking forward to.
That's facial expression, Raven. Well, before we end, I guess we'll take our last question from Auden. If you're there, you could come on and ask your question. Okay. Auden, you there? I guess not. Okay.
I can't hear them clearly.
I guess not. His hand is up, but he's not responding. So I guess while I'm not sure if you will, now that Raven, you could probably give your final words to those viewing.
Okay, so thank you, EKID, for helping me facilitate this. It has been amazing. Thank you to all the persons that have messaged privately and stuff. Again, I always think it's very cliche because I hear it so much, and I sometimes say in a jokingly way, but intersectionality, guys, intersectionality is key. But really, it is the allies from the non-LGBT movement, the allies from the feminist part of the movement, from L, the G, and the B, the overall encompassing support that we can provide at intersections. And even if it doesn't benefit us, like Maria said, amplify somebody else's voice to help the progress. So anytime I can help, share, or give my insight, I will. Reach out to me, Butterfly Barbados, on Instagram and Facebook. butterflybarbados246@gmail.com if you want to email me and have a more personal conversation. And I can't wait for the next one.
Okay, so I guess you're putting in a word for part 2, which is good, because I mean the conversation needs to continue. So with that being said, I want to thank all of you guys for tuning in, and a big thank you, Raven, for doing this. And I mean, Friday is the Trans Remembrance Day, so
oh yeah, so look out for a video on Butterfly's page, and I think yeah, look out for something on Butterfly. I think EK is also going to do something that maybe me oversharing. But yes, look out for all the other things before the Trans Awareness Week is over. And I just want to note that Trans Day of Remembrance is something that is celebrated every year worldwide. And although we've not experienced any trans murders in Barbados since the early 2000s, so there was one trans woman who was murdered by her partner, I think that is still the conversation about it still needs to be had, because there's not any murders currently up to date like the global numbers. But Lord forbid that ever happens here. Kanita already does not want me to get a certain something, and we'll talk about that. What Kanita know what we're talking about. But yes, stay safe, stay protected, and stay aware. So yeah, I'm done talking now.
Yeah, thank you. And with that, I would like to invite you all to next week Wednesday's session, where we will be discussing gender-based violence advocacy in the Eastern Caribbean, strategies for working effectively at the intersection of mainstream women and LGBTQ plus activists, and that will be facilitated by Ronald King out of Barbados and Derwin Wills out of Guyana. So look forward to seeing all of you on, and you could register very soon. Oh, and Warren said he's back. I'm not sure if he wants to ask his question now before we just end. So Warren, if you're there, you could go ahead before we end.
Hi, how are you? I came in late, and as soon as I raised my hand, I had to go and deal with an issue. But contrary to what I heard earlier on, is that now most oftentimes we have meetings for the communities, and a lot of times we do not invite members of parliament to be a part of our meetings. And a next thing that Raven mentioned earlier is that sending emails and so forth to these politicians. I think sometimes we need to invite them in our space and interact with them more, so that we can see their reaction as to sending emails and so forth. And the next thing, government officials, members of parliament, to me, they pay more attention to what the public may think, what churches may think, what the heterosexual community may think. And I think they pay much more attention to their votes when it's election time than to try to change laws and make laws so that people from the community can feel more comfortable, you know, so that's one of the things.
Okay, so I know from my experience, we've invited the past political party and the current to the safe space, and we've gotten some interaction from the past government. However, this current government, we've definitely had more of a hands-on working relationship. Even one minister forwarded an email to another one just so that he could have interaction with us. Again, when you're talking about having these parliamentarians or politicians in the community space, you have to ask the community if that is what they truly want. Because sometimes 2 or 3 persons may want the politicians there to quarrel and bicker about things that they don't have access to, while 3 more may want the same person there to have an open discussion to educate them on the lack of that we are experiencing. and the other 5 just may not be interested. So it depends on the group. It depends on the assessment of the needs if you do invite them. But again, you also have to realize that some of these government officials have had their schedule set for 6 months since before we would have even sent an email or showed up in person and say, hi, we would like to invite you here, or whatever the case may be. Again, permanent secretaries are a good way to get a little more buy-in, because the permanent secretaries probably will know their schedule better than the actual minister themselves. So it depends on the level of interaction, if they want to interact. I know I've been in spaces where working with the Ministry of Health as a HIV tester, and going to certain Ministry of Health events or functions or socials. I've interacted with other ministers from other government branches, and they have had an interest in me based on me working with the Ministry of Health. So you also need to see, again, these mix and mingles where you can present yourself and have an opportunity to get access to other members of parliament.
And I think you hit the nail right on the head, Ravens. Because I mean, as much as we could try as much as we want to reach parliamentarians, it's sometimes up to them if they want to get back to us or not. And there's so much that we could do as activists to have them involved, right? So with that being said, looking forward to seeing all of you guys next week. And thank you all once again. And this is where I say goodbye and enjoy the rest. Be safe and wear your mask, to protect yourself and your loved ones. Thank you very much, everyone. Bye.
All right, bye.